8.1. It's time for Freshly Pressed 981, where we give you detailed analysis of the national news headlines. And to do that with us today, we have our analysts in the studio. But before I introduce our analyst for today, I'd like to tell you how you can get involved or you can participate in the show this morning. You can send your message to WhatsApp. WhatsApp number is 0809 444 0981. That's 0809 444 0981. If you'd like to send a message to our WhatsApp, to our Twitter handle, please do so at Smooth981FM. Use the hashtag Freshly Pressed 981. On YouTube, we're streaming live, so please go on there and subscribe to our page, Smooth 98.1. Don't forget, we post our news headlines early in the morning from about 6:30 on our WhatsApp and Twitter platforms. All right, so our analyst today, we have Mr. C. Good morning, Mr. C.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Nwaji. Good morning, Lagos.
Mr. C is at Mr. C5Es on Twitter, and we have the corporate MC on Twitter, Waji. Good morning, Waji.
Morning, Ayo. Morning, Big C. And good morning, Lagos.
All right, fantastic. My name, you already said my name. I was going to say Ayo Mairo Ese, moderating this morning, but thank you very much. We'll go straight into our story for this morning. First one here, Waji. Repay your support. Open your economy, Buhari tells South Africa. So President Buhari yesterday urged the South African government to repay Nigeria's benevolence to its companies by opening up its economy for Nigerian businessmen and women. This is according to a statement by his special assistant on media and publicity, Malam Garba Shehu. Now, Waji, the president's visit to South Africa, diplomatic visit to South Africa, has been met with a number of comments and responses. However, these reports details some of the conversations between him and the president of South Africa. Can you please take us through this story?
Okay, so President Buhari is now having a conversation with Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, to more or less give further light on our bilateral relationships to make sure that we are coexisting as the two African powerhouses, a very important component. And obviously Buhari is speaking as a result of the issues that happened with the xenophobic attacks where Nigerians were attacked and their businesses were attacked as well, to more or less just begin to talk about how best we can continue to build economic bridges between one another so that we can have sustaining and lasting peace, and also giving further credence that South Africa should be able to now compensate those Nigerian businesses that were damaged as a result of the xenophobic attacks, and then subsequently now open up their economy to Nigerian businesses for things of that nature.
Yeah.
Fantastic. The narratives, the platitudes, and the conversations are very, very well meaning and very well intended. And I'm going to try my best not to be a pessimist, because my whole thing always comes from a position of legitimacy. Under what circumstances does this particular government have to dictate to any foreign government what they should be doing from an orchestrated point of view when your own capacity is in tatters? That is my issue. So I appreciate what he is saying with regards to what South Africa needs to do. And Cyril Ramaphosa equally responded to say that, yes, Nigeria has been very supportive, especially during apartheid and the different things that we did. And yes, we do take some responsibility to make sure that the lives and the property of Nigerians who are living in South Africa should be taken care of, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, I just find it somewhat rich that he's articulating these things, but then we can constantly have the challenges abroad. I mean, here at home.
Yes.
So it's what it is. So once again, I don't want to. I'm trying not to be a pessimist. I want to separate the wording of this particular article, which speaks to some very specific things that South Africa should be doing, and South Africa have responded. So when he says open up your economy, we do quite a lot of business with South Africa. You know, I do quite a lot with South African businesses, so it's not, and they do a lot of business here. So when he says open up your economy, there's no restriction with regards to how you engage with South African businesses to get trade going back and forth. You exchange intellectual property, you exchange resources, you switch human capital back and forth. So these things are existing. So I think he's just more or less pointing towards the fact that we should not allow these xenophobic attacks to affect the current relationships and climate that exists between Nigeria and South Africa.
Thank you very much. Now, from the report, and I would encourage everyone to read that if you can, it's from the Punch newspaper. Would you say you're confident in the aftermath in terms of what this would then mean, that perhaps would have better relationships with South Africa?
We've never had bad relationship with South Africa, to be perfectly honest, on a very macro level. These incidences that we're referring to are highly disproportionate when you begin to look at how it affects the larger things at play. everybody. Like I say, we are one of the biggest trading partners to South Africa on the African continent. There is a lot that happens, like I said earlier, when it comes to intellectual property, natural resources, human capital. A lot of exchange goes back and forth. So I don't necessarily believe that those things have been negatively impacted. They are at a very micro level.
Okay.
So I think what Buhari did, like I said, the wording is great, which is make sure that the Nigerian businesses that were affected are compensated,
All right.
so that we can ensure that that healthy relationship continues.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Take some comments here on WhatsApp. MI says, MI from Akoka, one of my concerns about President Buhari's rhetoric in South Africa was that it sounded more like a plea than an affirmative. I will skip over the fact that he wasn't received by the leader at the airport, even after visiting. We need to negotiate from a place of strength. All right, thank you very much, MI. We'll go on to our next story here. 4 years too short for leaders to make impact. So from the current president, we'll move on to a story with regards to the ex-president, former President Goodluck Jonathan, who said yesterday at the Constitutional Term Limit Summit in Niger Republic that a 4-year tenure was too short for any president to make meaningful impact in the country. Do you agree or disagree with this stance, C?
So, okay, before I state whether I agree or disagree, let me state what ex-President Jonathan said.
Okay.
Now, as you said, he was speaking at some constitutional reform summit in Niamey, the capital of Niger Republic. Now, former President Jonathan's argument is 4 years is too short to make any meaningful impact, and that for developing countries, the cost of conducting elections every 4-year cycle is burdensome.
Yeah.
And he was advocating, he seemed to be suggesting the 6-year tenure. Now,
Which he had
during his when he was in office, but that move didn't work. Now, to answer your question, I disagree. Now, 4 years for someone who has a plan before entering office is enough time to begin to manifest whatever plan you have. What we find in Nigeria is people stumble into office and there's no plan, no clue, nothing. So they spend the first 2 years trying to understand what they're supposed to be doing. By the 3rd year, they're now thinking of a re-election.
Yes.
4th year, governance shuts down completely. All they're focused on is the re-election. And who suffers for all of this? Me and you.
Right.
Because in civilized countries, let me not say civilized countries, in proper and serious countries, Nigeria is not a serious country.
So in developed countries, let's
No.
go to that.
No. I stand by what I said.
Nope.
Proper and serious
Because
countries.
even developing countries don't have these issues. So
In proper and
we're
serious
just not
countries,
serious,
people have plans. In 10 years, they want to be in this office. They start working towards that. And when they enter office, they hit the ground running. Now, contrast that with what happened after the 2019 elections. For about 3-6 months, a lot of state governments, no cabinets in place. And these are governments who would then turn around to tell you that 4 years is too short. Your president took time to nominate his cabinet.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Point
Can
well
I-
taken.
Can I just chip in? Thank you so much for that. The purpose of campaigns is not just to go around and make public speeches and solicit votes. It's also for you to build shadow cabinets in the anticipation that you are going to win the election. So come the time that you are inaugurated and also working in cohesion with whatever transition committee at the state, federal, or local level, you ensure that you have been properly positioned to now execute the services of your office within those first 100 days. That is the entire purpose of you going into politics. The mere fact that that is lost on majority of our politicians who go into any kind of campaign season speaks to C's point about how we are literally not serious.
All right, so now just to move it a bit away from the presidency, very short answer from both of you. How about legislature, senators and House of Representative members? They've also argued for a longer term in office, so to effectively carry out the duties. You agree or not?
Same thing.
Same thing.
So 4 years is enough. Thank you.
No, it's not about it being enough. It's do you have a plan?
All right.
And are you executing your plan? So whether it's 6 months, 1 year, because if you increase it to 6 years, we're going to have the same problem if you don't have a plan.
All right, thank you very much. Devo says, have we no shame? A country's people chase us out even after an apology. Who should be visiting who? This goes against all logical protocol and precedents. We've given them more in history and currently as regards multinational gains. Next time, they won't blink once xenophobic attacks occur. I feel bad for Nigerians in South Africa. All right, thank you very much. We move on to MJ saying, guys, 4 years is too short. There are other dependencies that don't work with your own timelines. Yes, it is enough to manifest your plans, but ultimately you need time to fully execute. Even concrete needs to cure. MJ, that's MJ's thought. All right, let's move on to our next story. Waji, Senate raises 2020 budget from 9.12 trillion naira to 10.729 trillion naira. Guard your newspaper.
Okay, Ayo, do you know what a banana republic is?
Yes, we talked about that earlier this week.
Fantastic. So for those who don't know, Banana Republic is a country, it's defined as a small country, which we unfortunately aren't, that is dependent on a single export that is controlled by foreign capital. What does that sound like? Oh, okay, Nigeria. Our challenge with this particular budget and the projections and forecastings and fluctuations that we find ourselves in is that it is dependent on one particular single resource. So that is why the Senate are challenging for this particular increase to get us to understand why is the budget going from this to this and what does it now speak to. What you're now beginning to see is that you have a shift in the anticipated cost of oil per barrel, going from $55 to $57. And the reasons why the Senate were advising to keep it at $55 was to protect against the volatility of the oil markets or everything else that may be. But the issue is that without proper analysis looking to 2020, that particular oil revenue should be somewhere between $65 to $70 per barrel. Why? Because of the crisis that's happening in Saudi, where half of their oil outputs have been negatively affected, which should positively impact upon us because the global price is going to go up, and majority of the oil is going to come from places like Nigeria, Venezuela, and Angola. That's just a known fact. But the challenge with going back to this particular budgetary increase is that if you do not make provisions for any kind of decentralization of your dependency on oil, you're going to have these kind of issues. If you don't focus on diversification that goes into agriculture, that goes into human capital development, that goes into intellectual property capacity development, that goes into any kind of technological infrastructure or just general physical infrastructure itself, we are going to be in a perpetual state of just confusion, thinking that oil is going to contribute towards these particular increases that you see without any tangible results in the economy. With this particular budget, you're not going to see any more jobs. You're not going to see any infrastructure development. You're not going to see any increase or improvement in electricity. This is the problem that we keep having when we always do things dependent on this particular gift that we call it, but it's a curse, Ayo. Okay, it's actually a term for it. It's called the Dutch disease, the curse of the black gold. And the problem is until we move away from that, and we can have it as a budgetary line item that brings us cash, but we need to also begin to focus on other areas that also generate significant revenue for the country. And if we don't do that, we're just going to continue having this perpetual issue, because this particular increase in the budget that's being proposed should directly correlate to some heavy infrastructure development, some heavy social economic projects, some heavy rule of law initiatives to make sure Nigeria begins to stabilize, which we're not seeing. So that is what the Senate is challenging the presidency on.
Absolutely. And I remember when the budget was presented initially, some economists criticized the fact that it was too small for the size of the country.
Thank you. It doesn't make any sense.
This. Right. Thank you very much indeed. We have Oluchi here from Maryland who says a year is not enough to create an impact. A year is enough, to create an impact if you know what to do.
Yes.
Even if it is a section, for instance, school, education, and so on. Henry says every year increase in an annual budget without any significant impact on the economy is nothing but scam.
Boom.
Thank you for your comments. All right, Mr. C, I'll come to you for the next one. Let's talk traffic, particularly in Lagos. I feel the need to apologize to Lagosians who have had to endure horrendous traffic in the past few days, particularly because of the heavy rains. And Punch has this news headline: Gridlock, Lagos issues 7-day ultimatum to roadside traders. So the Lagos state government has issued a 7-day ultimatum to traders and transport workers in 7 locations across the state to vacate the roadsides or face the wrath of the law. What do you have to say about this?
Okay, so the Lagos state government has identified 7 locations across the state where they believe that the activities of traders and transport workers have contributed to the unending traffic problems that the state is encountering. And they propose to give them a 7-day abatement notice,
Mm.
after which they will begin to enforce the relevant laws. Now, my question is this. Why are they congregating at those spots? Because when you conduct this exercise and you're done, a few months down the line, we're back to the same position.
Mm.
And then second question is, why do you need to get them an abatement notice if they're already in violation of existing laws? I don't understand. Why can't you just enforce the laws? Because they're not supposed to be there.
Mm.
But the traffic situation in Lagos goes beyond exercises like this.
Okay.
A lot of the roads are physically not in good shape. And the excuse the governor provided at the platform on Tuesday is simply not tenable. That it's the rainy season. Come on, please.
Sorry, Scenes. To Aya's point, right? This is why we're not serious. This very conversation. Ce's point.
Yeah.
This is why we're not serious.
Okay.
This is what he's saying is going back to the point about how it's not a question of how long. It's how it's your intention. It's your deliberation. We are literally not serious. For a sitting governor to open his mouth and say, "Oh, it's the rainy season." Are you actually?
All right. So I just need
serious?
to point out here that we shouldn't forget that when he took office, he gave a themes agenda, and number one or the first letter is T, which is transport and traffic management. And perhaps it's time to ask Lagos, a little over 100 days in office, are you confident about the actions being taken to manage traffic in Lagos?
I'm sorry, who are you asking? Are you asking Lagos or are you asking
Let me ask Lagos, because I think I know your answers already. But let me ask Lagos out there, are you confident? Because a number of people have, and it's not just in Lekki, all around, a number of people have complained. Again, beyond the roadside traders, we've also identified a number of issues, including the bad state of the roads. But let's hear, we've seen more LASMA officials being deployed on the roads though, so we have to acknowledge that. But let's move on to our next story. And this story kind of ties into traffic because they also cause traffic in Lagos. But Senate has told the president to integrate almajiris into education system. So we have this news report from the Daily Times, and they've talked about the agitation caused by the menace of street begging in the country, and the Senate on this premise have called on the federal government to formulate a policy that would find a way to integrate almajiris into the education system so they would be discouraged from street begging.
Man, y'all on one today, man. Nigeria. Okay. Ayo.
Yes.
The eradication of poverty can only be achieved through a structural education program. Okay, that's actually the foundation of how you get anybody out of poverty. You have to start with that. Why? Education, any form, almajiri, formal Western education, traditional education, what it does is that it gives an individual a sense of purpose, a sense of hope, and a sense of deliberation, and more importantly, a sense of ambition with regards to what they want to do. And it doesn't actually matter as long as it's within the confines of the law and you're not hurting or scamming anybody, then it's actually perfectly acceptable. When you now do not have that situation, people and their families are forced to now find ways to sustain themselves, because the basic human reaction towards anything is survival. You have to eat, you have to protect yourself, whatever the case may be, which is what now points to the sheer number of beggars that we see on the roads all over Nigeria. Now, I appreciate how you should incorporate this particular system into our educational system as a whole, to now allow it to qualify you for further education, or at some point some kind of entry-level job situations, whatever the case may be. That is cool. I accept that. But we are still not tackling some fundamental component about poverty. Why are people on the roads to begin with? Why are they sleeping on motor parks, outside churches, or all these other places? It's because there's nothing for them to do. So if you can educate people, that's great. But if you do not have a sustainable economy that's growing to provide resources for these people to have sustainable lives that come out of some sort of dignity, they are going to be forced on the streets. So it's one thing to now request that we incorporate this almajiri system into our education system, but you also have to make sure you create a sustainable, great economy for these individuals to thrive in. So it has to work hand in hand.
All right, very good point. Now, we know that there's an existing law in Lagos that makes it illegal for children of a certain age, underage children, to be out of school. And when you see some of these beggars on the streets, they're underage, they're supposed to be in school. Should we not be asking the question around why is it not being enforced? Particularly, I'm using Lagos as a
C's point.
On serious government insurance enforcement of laws, Thank you.
Look, let me just say something. And I had this conversation on a platform I was on a couple of weeks ago, and it was very unpopular. And let me just be absolutely raw and real. We are not ready for sophisticated government in Nigeria. We are not ready for advanced citizenship in Nigeria. We need to suspend some civil liberties to get things cleaned up and get our minds thinking in a particular pattern to eradicate bad behavior over a long period of time in order for us to course correct. That is what I sincerely believe is the only way. So if some harsh measures need to be put in place, it is the only way you will get the behaviors that speak to things to get enforcement. So it's one thing we can clown government on enforcing, but let me be honest with you. What do you want these guys to do? There's a I saw a situation just at the Lekki Toll the other day where they put up those barriers so people don't jump in. There was a guy that was literally about to run over a Lasma guy so that he could cut into the lane. And then the policeman now came, and I was saying to myself, so what should the policeman do? Shoot this guy dead? Because what else do you want them to do? So we can criticize government all we want, but at the same time, we are also the problem, and that's why we get the leadership we deserve.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Nwaji. I'll take some comments. Opeoluwa from Rawa says, traders are part of the issue, but to be sincere, potholes caused by terrible road repair causes traffic more in Lagos. You see the relevant government agency do a shabby road repair that doesn't even last a month before holes resurface. And back to President Jonathan, Samwi says, but the ex-president built schools for the almajiris. Where did they all end? Grazing fields for cows. And then I have been waiting for this Lagos news a long time. The drainages are bad, a lot of substandard roads, inadequate road maintenance. For God's sake, let them face the roads well instead of the roadside traders that they collect money from. And we also have from Taiwo Oyekomi, who says, for a governor to say the rain causes the gridlock in Lagos is just telling us the level of what he's thinking is. All right. There are two seasons in Nigeria, which is rainy and dry season.
And that's it.
Their planning purposes. Thank you very much indeed. All right, let's move on to the next story here. Talking about the police, hopefully not shoot on sight, please. We talk about misuse of firearms. Let's go to that one. Please review Force Order 237 this day. When I read this, the first thing that came to my mind was good, encouraging news. See, can you please take us through this Force Order 237 review?
Okay, so for our listeners out there, Police Force Order 237 is the order that lays down or stipulates the rules of engagement. Now, the Nigerian police has acquired a notorious reputation for illegal or substandard use of weapons, firearms, and there have been numerous accounts of stray bullets or some nonsense along those lines. Now, this is instructive, and what this order really basically says in the revised document, the Nigerian Police Force is now prepared to adopt the use of tasers and stun guns in the place of conventional live bullets. Now, this is a step in the right direction because many innocent lives have been lost due to the use of mishandling of firearms. Now, this revised order was put together in conjunction with the Red Cross, the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, the Swiss government, and National Human Rights Commission. And it's basically to ensure that the police going forward in dealing with the public deals with them in a standard and regular way, and hopefully there's no loss of life. Now, I must commend the current IGP because this is a step in the right direction, and I sincerely hope that it will achieve the desired result. However, for this revised document to become very effective, it has to be communicated down to the rank and file in places like Kafanchan, Idimu, Dutse, Idiroko in Ogun State. Because what normally transpires is the IGP said something in his office in Abuja, and then the rank and file, for example, every IGP in the last 10 years has come out to say roadblocks are banned. But you're driving on the highways and you're telling the policemen manning the roadblocks about your guy in Abuja says no roadblock. They said that's for him.
That's what they say.
They've not received any signal that he's on his own. So for this revised order to be effective, the IGP has to ensure that it is communicated to the people down there. And also, no matter how good a policy is, if the people who are meant to implement or execute that policy haven't been trained or haven't been reoriented, that policy is in trouble.
All right.
So we need to look we need to retrain the Nigerian policemen, even on the use of tasers and stun guns.
All right. Which in the report he highlights that they're going to train them, that they're going to have more training for the police officers.
Now, do they have the resources to? Where will these stun guns and tasers be deployed?
Okay.
That's a very good question. We don't know yet. And then, do they have the resources to train everyone required to use it?
All right, good point. Thank you very much. Sini, he says, I disagree about civil suspension. Waji, as you suspected, they're going to come for you. The main
Most people
problem
disagree.
is
That's
our
fine.
government's sincerity and consequences for people's action. There is law and order in saner crime over time because there are consequences for
But
bad
how did
behavior.
they? How did they
here,
get there?
mostly none.
How did they get there? That's
All
the
right.
thing. Look at the organic growth of nations. And I'm sorry, the beauty about the tree of liberty is that it has to be sacrificed with blood. End of story.
All right, thank you very much. So we go on to our next story here. Kaduna government speaks on kidnap of students, teachers, says efforts ongoing to free victims. Punch newspaper carries this story. They also they talked about the report from the Premium Times, and they related that. Yeah, that's what I was looking for in relation to the Premium Times report. Waji, very quickly, can you take us through
This
that?
is very horrible and sad, and this is where we're getting back to where kids are being kidnapped from schools. It's horrible, and obviously there's not a lot of detail in this story from the Punch. They're referencing what they saw in the Premium Times, and it's basically that it was students and a teacher who were kidnapped. And they're just basically advocating for the release of these individuals. So I think the security forces need to jump on this. We need to get into the intelligence community to figure out what happened. And I think we need to resort to some old-fashioned snitches who can now give communication as to where these people may or may not be located. I think we covered a story a couple of weeks ago as to how we want to incorporate these individuals into our security apparatus to make sure that we have information that gives us good intelligence to rescue people. So that'll be the advice I give. It's horrible. Obviously, this now speaks to the larger issues because the kidnapping has definitely now gone into the north and gone completely nuclear. So it's a real shame that this is now exploding back into the schools. It's a throwback to the Chibok situations, and I really, really hope that they get to the bottom of this and they release these students and the teacher.
Thank you very much, Waji. Trudy from Surulere says, greetings. Police officers have no business using automatic weapons of war on civilians. Holstered handguns are appropriate. Automatics for SWAT. Thanks, Trudy. And then Osa from Abulegba says, good morning. In answer to your question about traffic, the answer is no. Roads are still in tatters. Increase in LASMA officials is no solution. Thank you very much, Osa. And final story here. Chibok school remains shut 5 years after mass abduction. This story is from the Punch newspaper, and it is from Miss Dr. Manasseh Allen, who is a member of the Kibaku Area Development Association in Abuja. See, please take us through the story.
Okay, so this is a very sad story. We're all aware of what happened 5 years ago when over 200 girls was kidnapped from the Chibok Government Girls Secondary School, and a lot of them are still in captivity. Now, this story makes us understand that since that unfortunate incident, the school itself has been shut down, and they're being forced to use the primary school after the primary school vacates or closes for the day. Now, this is really sad. This is really tragic. We note the efforts of the federal government by ensuring that there's a brigade in town, but how does this impact on the development of these young girls? Because I wonder what can be learned from about 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock to whatever time. And these are secondary school students who we expect will transition to the university and further on. So it's really sad that for 5 years nothing has happened, and I do hope that the authorities are listening to us, they're reading the stories, and they do what is required.
All right, thank you very much indeed. See, Bolaji from Akoka says, all these government officials should be made to give accounts. We're so docile. Labor that should coordinate us only collect monthly deductions from workers and go back to hind. Governor squanders funds and come back to tax the people. And then Emeka says, how about the police also review the type of firearms they're using? Why are they still using rifles openly as though we're still in the colonial era or a war zone? Why not use a concealed weapon or, like a pistol? All right, thank you very much indeed to everyone who sent in comments on our platforms. A big thanks to our analysts for today, Mr. C, on Twitter at Mr. C with 5 E's. Thank you very much. And Waji at the Corporate MC on Twitter, Corporate with a K. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We continue the conversation, Lagos Online. Please follow us at Smooth981FM on Twitter. Use the hashtag FreshlyPressed981 so that you can challenge some thoughts that have been expressed this morning or share your thoughts that we couldn't take on air. We're going to break now at 8:15. We'll come back with the locker room. We have sports in a moment. Stay tuned.